All right, thanks so much. Good evening. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from Washington, D.C. It is great to be back on a historic night. Despite the constant noise from the naysayers, another promise kept. The president striking a stunning trade deal with Mexico. In moments, we speak exclusively to White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow and the Mexican foreign minister who helped make it happen. And the Democrats continue to indulge in impeachment fantasy. Of course they do. But do they do so at their own expense, their own peril? Some shocking evidence ahead. Plus, the death of an American hero being used as a resistance prop? We'll explain. And the Catholic Church at a crossroads, a former Vatican ambassador to the U.S. making explosive claims that Pope Francis knowingly protected a sexual predator. Bishops are now taking sides. A special Monday appearance by Raymond Arroyo later in the hour. But first, Trump's trade triumph. That's the focus of tonight's angle. As the media fixate on sideshows that'll have zero impact on American lives, things like the Manafort verdict or Stormy Daniels' latest squall, or even recently the issue with the flag going up or down, half-mast, full-mast, Trump is methodically fulfilling his campaign promises. And today, he delivered on a huge one, announcing a new trade deal between Mexico and the United States. Now, remember what he said during the campaign.
I'm going to tell our NAFTA partners that I intend to immediately renegotiate the terms of that agreement to get a better deal by a lot, not just a little, by a lot for our workers. A Trump administration will end that war by getting a fair deal for the American people and the American worker. The era of economic surrender will finally be over.
And boy, is it. Today's agreement makes critical changes to U.S.-Mexico trade. Among them, 75% of auto parts will be produced in North America. That's up from 62.5%, any vehicle coming into the United States. And 40 to 45% of auto parts will be made by workers earning at least $16 an hour. Good stuff. The deal also strengthens intellectual property and financial services trade protections, also improves the trade of digital products. From the start, though, there were those who said it couldn't be done. Trump can't do it. It's all a bunch of bluster. And when Trump raised the ante, threatening to impose new tough tariffs on Mexico and Canada, the reaction was apocalyptic.
We're in the nascent stages of a full-scale trade war, and the president simply seems to want to escalate.
It's not just my state that is involved here, it's our nation. It has significant consequences for us here at home, not only just economically, but politically.
If you alienate Mexico over the wall and over NAFTA, what you end up doing is electing this summer a much more nationalistic, much more radical Mexican president who will not cooperate.
Well, it turns out old Almo is on board with what they discussed. Now, just like the moving of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, the renegotiation of the trade deal with South Korea, and Trump standing up to China, the so-called experts have consistently gotten it wrong, underestimating Trump. You see, the president has his own team of real experts. These are people from outside the old globalist trade establishment who were responsible, frankly, for those complicated multilateral deals that hurt the American worker and destroyed American industries. From the start, members of Trump's team, like Jared Kushner and U.S. Trade Rep Bob Lighthizer, were committed to leveling the playing field and creating reciprocity between nations. That means fair deals that will allow all parties to prosper. Isn't that what we want? And the bilateral deals, country to country, may indeed end up being the most enforceable and the most beneficial for all. Both the current and the soon-to-be Mexican presidents see the wisdom of bilateral arrangements with the United States. Now, they'd like Canada to be part of it, but if not, they're not going to sabotage it. This is what Trump touted today.
They used to call it NAFTA. We're going to call it the United States-Mexico Trade Agreement. We'll get rid of the name NAFTA. It has a bad connotation because the United States was hurt very badly by NAFTA for many years, and now it's a really good deal for both countries. and we look very much forward to it.
Now it's up to Canada, which is sending a rep to Washington tomorrow to either sign on to the Mexico deal, or I guess try to fashion its own bilateral deal with the United States down the road.
We will see whether or not we decide to put up Canada or just do a separate deal with Canada if they want to make the deal. The simplest deal is more or less already made.
Now, in the meantime, Trump is moving forward. And as I said, why should Mexico and the United States allow their trade relationship to be held hostage to domestic politics in Canada? And, of course, Trudeau's stonewalling. The strides made after a year of negotiations are really impressive. And any objective observer, if there is any of those left, would admit that tonight. And by the way, this is going to set the benchmark for any future deals in this hemisphere. Now, if the reaction of the stock market is any indication, which surged in reaction to today's news, Congress should fast-track the U.S.-Mexican trade agreement and keep the Trump economy humming. And that's the angle. Joining us now with reaction is Luis Videgaray. He's the Secretary of Foreign Affairs for Mexico. It is great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us. Es un placer, señor.
Es un placer.
Es un placer. Let's talk about what happened. Luis Videgaray. He's the Secretary of Foreign Affairs for Mexico. It is great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us. Es un placer, señor.
Es un placer.
Es un placer. Let's talk about what happened today. How significant is this in the relationship between Mexico and the United States?
It's really significant. I think it's a breakthrough, and it shows that two countries can actually get together and do a good deal for both of them that is reciprocal, that is fair, and will allow growth on both sides. It's good for Mexican workers, it's good for the American worker. I think this is a brilliant deal.
This Washington Post columnist, Catherine Rampel, was on CNN today for quite a while, and she discussed what this meant and what about Canada. Let's watch.
Trump really needs a win, right? He needs a win before the midterms. He wants to be able to say that he has renegotiated NAFTA. In that case, he needs Canada on board. You have this very short window to get Canada on board. Otherwise, the whole deal could fall apart on the Mexico side.
What about that? The whole deal could fall apart on your side if Canada, when they come tomorrow, we got the economic minister coming tomorrow, it's all over?
Let me tell you how we've explained this to the Mexican people. For almost 2 years, we've had great uncertainty on whether we would still have access to the U.S. market through a trade agreement. And that's been the debate, because losing access to the U.S. market would be significant for the Mexican economy. What happened today is significant because we are guaranteeing that we'll have a trade agreement with the U.S. We love Canada, and we want to have Canada as part of the deal. But in case that for whatever reason, Canada is not able to join, we'll still have a deal with the U.S. and we'll move on. And the next coming days, the next few days are going to be crucial for whether Canada is part of the deal. We are going to work 24/7 to enable the possibility of Canada being part of the deal. And as I repeat, we really have a strong relationship with Canada. We want them in. But if at the end of the day, for whatever reason, they're not able to be part of it, we'll still move on and have a very good deal with the U.S.
Jared Kushner, when he came in to the White House, a lot of people thought, it's just the president's son-in-law. What does he know? Why would he have any position of authority? How critical was he in your working relationship over the last couple of years, really, to get this done?
Jared has been absolutely instrumental. I would say that we would never arrive to this day without Jared's hard work, with his vision, and just his courage. We've been through some rough patches in this relationship. We've had our moments where things were almost falling apart. And at those very difficult times, Jared was there, holding up the relationship and enabling this moment to happen. So when we get to this point where we actually have a deal, and it's a very good deal, I think, for both sides, certainly Jared is a guy that should be at the top of the list of the people that make it happen.
Yeah, New York Times headline, January 24th, 2017, facing Trump, Mexicans think the unthinkable, leaving NAFTA. How much, how wrong, I would say, were many of the experts and what was possible between Mexico and Trump?
Well, I think a lot of people thought that this collision was unavoidable, that this was going to be a disaster. That actually, you know what, Laura? A lot of people thought that NAFTA would be over last year, early last year, and that there was no way to fix this relationship in a way that would be constructive to both sides. We proved them wrong. Through very disciplined, tenacious work, and with a vision. To make
and Bob Lighthizer, critical U.S. trade rep.
Yeah.
You've become very close to him. You guys are adversarial, yet you respect each other's priorities.
I have tremendous respect for Bob. He's a true expert. He's an honest guy. Really tough. It's really tough.
That's what he says about you.
It's really tough to deal with Bob, but he's phenomenal, and you know he's an honest guy to deal with.
Almost out of time, but Almo, new president, Mexico. A lot of people also predicted, and I was a little bit worried that when he came into power, he's coming to power at the end of the year. It's going to be tougher for the United States. How will that work out? Really quick.
We've been working like one team. AMLO has been sending representatives to this negotiation. They've been observers, but more than observers. They've been active participants, and I think they're part of the reason why we got to this day.
Your message to U.S. Congress: get this thing approved.
This is good not only for Mexico. This is great for America. This is great for Mexico. Yeah, it definitely should pass both in the U.S. Congress and the Mexican Congress.
Mr. Foreign Minister, thank you so much for being with us. Great job for your country. We really appreciate it. And just a short while ago, I spoke with the president's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, for the White House's response and perspective. Larry, it's great to be with you.
Thank you,
Laura. Have you here. Thanks
Wonderful.
so much.
Thank you.
Let's talk about what happened today. We just heard from Luis Videgaray, the Mexican foreign minister, of course, about how we got to this place where all of these naysayers said it wasn't possible. You couldn't strike a deal with Mexico. Trump had poisoned the relationship. Give us a little behind-the-scenes look.
Our side, their side, you're absolutely right. And then it kept coming together. Instead of moving apart, it came together. And every time it was a setback, it kept moving. Huge, huge credit to Jared Kushner and Bob Lighthizer. Honestly. I mean, Lighthizer the team leader. Jared was great. POTUS kept giving a green light, you know.
Get it done. He wants results. He wants people in his administration who get results, correct?
Yes, President told me probably 2 months ago, he said, I am sick of this multilateral stuff, okay? He said, you go out there and tell folks that I want to do bilateral, much simpler, much more direct. And I screaming at President Trump, his tactics and his aggressiveness and his plain speaking. Looks like it's paying off to me. Looks like it's paying off to me.
Yeah, the stock market, another near record high today, up 259 points.
This was a growthy deal. I call it growthier.
Are you using, there it is. Are you using growth as an adjective, Larry?
Growthier.
Is that something that came with the little heart issue you had? Now you have more heart for the economy.
It's a Kudlow word.
I've known Larry for 20 plus years. I can make a joke about heart.
I got it into an op-ed in the Washington Post.
Okay, good.
So
it's a real word now.
Growthier. But in all seriousness, this is a deal that free trade, fair trade, growth, prosperity for both sides, market openings, better labor value, intellectual property protection.
But wait a second, David Stockman, Reagan's budget guy, Reagan's guy.
My former boss.
Yeah, your former boss said this today. Let's watch.
I think it's a great big PR stunt. This isn't MAGA, okay? This isn't going to do a lot for the American economy or workers. In fact, NAFTA was never a problem. The whole thing is like a phony issue.
Well, look, Dave's an old friend of mine. He and I disagree on a whole bunch of things the last 30 or so years. By the by, this is going to help workers, all right? There's good domestic content. There's good North American content laws, which are enforceable, going to give labor better value. There's some wage push going on in here. That's all very important. If you're not in the U.S.-Mexican zone or maybe the North American zone, like China, you're going to have a lot of trouble doing business, particularly in autos and auto parts. So I think this really helps the growth story.
But doesn't he represent kind of the old Republican Party where if you push back on any of these big trade deals, and you and I have been talking about this on the radio and TV for literally 20 years now, it's the old guard still speaking out. And Stockman was the pro-growth guy. The idea that this is not going to be good for the American worker when 75% of the parts in any automobile coming into the United States has to be made either in the United States or Mexico instead of coming through China, which these auto parts have been coming through, siphoning through Mexico, coming into the United States, tariff-free, Larry. And David Stockman's out there with Cavuto today saying, oh, there's no big deal. Come on. What's happened to these people?
Crankiness. It needs crankiness. That's all I can say.
Making me cranky. Hearing him be cranky.
No, you're not cranky. We're part of the optimistic view. As I say, this is a growth component. I don't care what my pal Dave Stockman said or my former pal Dave Stockman said. Look, wait. No digital barriers, okay? Biological barriers, intellectual property rights barriers. This is going to give us a leg up on entrepreneurship and inventiveness, which is really the heart of the
Canada's coming in tomorrow, coming into town tomorrow, the Canadian economic minister, and she's going to be Freeland. I think she's going to be here. She likes giving speeches. It seems to me that Trudeau has previously enjoyed triangulating against Trump because for him it's good domestic politics, he thinks. But what they did, is this not true? They pushed it to the mat with Canada. I don't think Canada thought he was going to get a deal with Mexico. Suddenly, they're odd man out. Will they ultimately come to the table and agree to this deal?
Well, they're coming to town, and there will be a table. I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be.
Why is she flying into town to make another speech? She's good at making speeches.
Yeah, I don't want to get into personal stuff. Look, President spoke to Trudeau today. POTUS would like to get a good deal, okay? A good deal. But he told the Prime Minister, and he said to us, if we can't get a good deal, then he may well resort to automobile taxes or tariffs, foreign import taxes. The Canadians do not want that.
But they were ridiculing the president today, saying, well, these are American cars. It's Ford, et cetera, made in Canada coming in. But they were all ridiculing the president today, saying, well, the Canadians don't make cars. They're American cars made in Canada. But it doesn't matter. That's the same deal with Mexico. They're American cars, but when they have all these component parts that are made in China, it's not good. It's not a good deal for us. They're just ridiculing. They don't even know the trade deal. They're ridiculing him today.
By the way, I doubt if they read the trade paragraphs in the Mexican deal. But just putting that aside, as the president has said, he'd like to have a good deal, but if not, he's willing to go on the car tax if he has to do it. Okay? That's his negotiating form. And look, you have to be tough. You have to be strong. Trudeau disappointed us a lot, stabbing us in the back way last spring and the G7 meeting. I hope he doesn't pull any of that stuff again. Let's just go back to Mexico because I'm proud of that. There's so many market openings here. As I said, financial services, intellectual property rights, entrepreneurship. It's going to help the farmers. This is great stuff. Not tariffs. Market openings on both sides.
It's a more efficient marketplace. It's a more efficient marketplace.
Absolutely.
Everyone has said Trump's anti-trade. It's all a lie. It was a lie from the beginning. Larry,
Trump's free trader. You know that. He wants to get to the free trade, no tariffs, no non-tariff barriers, no subsidies. That's his goal, but you have to be tough to get to that.
Larry, before we let you go, John McCain, big controversy, White House lowered the flag, then raised it, lowered. What's up with that? What the heck happened with the flag? And everyone's focused on the flag and McCain and, was a great hero to this country and patriot.
I think that at the end of the day, the press release put out President's statements was the right thing. That's what my view is. I've known McCain a long time. You have too. Look, we all have our eccentricities.
No, we don't, Larry. We're perfect. We don't have any eccentricities.
Yeah, you and I have to sit here and reform the Catholic Church.
Oh, no. Well, that's another segment with Raymond Arroyo coming up. Hold that thought.
Segment. Here we are.
All right, Larry, thanks for coming in, man.
Trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, we're converts, and we act like we own the place.
Why are they doing this to us?
No. It makes it hard. Hey, thanks for staying up for us tonight. We really appreciate it. Great to see you.
Appreciate it.
Oh, and why the hard left's dream of impeaching President Trump may be the ultimate gift for Republicans in the midterms. What do I mean about that? Coming up.
I think it's becoming increasingly clear that the president will have two options. One, he can resign from office, or 2, he can face impeachment.
I think having thorough investigations, putting forth an impenetrable case to the American people, doing it in a bipartisan way is the proper way to do this, but we're not there yet.
Democrats are clearly torn. You just saw that on this issue of impeachment. Now, deep down, I think they know that their activist nut job base wants Trump impeached. Plus, they just love talking about it. Think it's going to help their ratings. But their internal polls are telling them something different, that the country is not that excited about another impeachment drama 20 years after the Clinton proceedings. But whatever path the Democrats choose to go down, one thing is clear. Republican voters sense that this is a winning issue. Take a listen to some of the callers on my radio show this morning.
The impeachment talk, I think, is wonderful. It motivated me and my family. I think they said it over 200 times at MSNBC and CNN. And I said, enough is enough. There's my motivation.
I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat, but nothing in this world is going to stop me from getting to the polls in November and voting straight Republican down the bill, because I'll do anything it takes to protect this president.
The personal life of Mr. Trump, we don't care. We see the results of him being in office, and it's amazing. And I'm saying this as a Mexican immigrant woman who registered Republican, and it's not just me. It's many people that I know.
Well, I love doing a radio show. You get the pulse of the people every single day, and the mainstream media are totally disconnected. Joining me now with their thoughts, Dan Bongino is a former Secret Service agent, Chris Hahn, radio host, former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer. It's great to see both of you. This impeachment talk is fascinating because it's like a kind of a trigger finger. Like you get a happy finger, like you're used to shooting and you're shooting at targets, and you got to watch yourself because maybe you're going to fire at something you don't want to fire at. Dan Bongino, I want to start with you. What about this kind of internal tug of war in the Democrat Party? Where does their heart lie on this issue?
Well, here's the problem the Democrats are having right now, Laura. Their activist radical base, the people who are motivated to go vote in primaries, the Bernie Sanders types, the Ocasio-Cortez supporters who wear the T-shirts, the We Love Socialism shirts with the big hearts, Those people are motivated to get Trump out of office no matter what. They're not even interested in a high crime or misdemeanor because Trump's crime was winning the election. That's it. That's the issue they have. The more moderate, if there are any be left, even reasonable, rational Democrats up on the Hill, understand that this is a total, complete loser. You have people like Eric Swalwell, who you showed before, the Democrat congressman, who represents a radical district in California. He may be okay saying that. But you go to a Joe Manchin type, if he were to win re-election in this Senate race, you think he's going to vote for impeachment in a Senate trial? Are you kidding me? That's a joke. Give me a break.
Chris Hahn, I get why the Democrats are kind of in this seemingly impossible position in a way, because that is where the juice is, right? We're going to get Trump. We're going to do hearings on whether Jared Kushner really should get a security clearance. They've been listing all these investigations that they want to do if indeed they take the House in November. But you get the sense that the regular folks out there, they're just not that jacked up on a year or two of hearings. I just don't feel it, at least.
Well, I don't know. It worked for the Republicans for 6 years when they controlled the House. That's all they did was hearings. Look, I don't think impeachment's going to be on the table unless you have a large group of Republicans decide that they feel that this president needs to be removed. And I don't think that's going to happen given our current environment. But I do believe that the president should be subject to checks and balances. And I think most of the American people agree with me on that. And I think that's why you're going to see the Democrats at least take the House, if not the House and Senate, come November. And look, impeachment is just one way to do things. Impeachment is just one way to do things, Laura. I know you and I are both fans of The Princess Bride. So is Dan. He won't admit it. But you know that last scene in The Princess Bride where he's talking to the prince, Wesley's talking to the prince and saying it's not a fight to the death. No, it's a fight to the pain. And that's what's going to happen in the last 2 years of the Trump presidency. If they try to go and take him out of office, they will guarantee him 4 more years. And I don't think the Democratic Party wants to do that. I think what they want to do is make sure that the people who are making things bad in this administration, the cabinet secretaries who are abusing their power and traveling on the government's dime,
I get that.
That stuff needs to be looked into by Congress, and this Congress has been feckless in doing it.
Okay,
and that's why the American people are voting them out.
Yeah, I get that. If Democrats have the House, actually things that are happening in the government, I understand that. We're talking about, well, why did he not release his tax returns? Americans already litigated that. It was called the election. That's what I'm getting at. But I also want to get your thoughts on something else. Last week, we all heard from the media that Trump was finished, Dan Bongino. Watch.
Yeah.
After this week, I think it's safe to say it's certainly the end of the beginning.
This has got to be the worst week the president has faced since taking office.
What might be Donald Trump's worst week ever as president.
This was Donald Trump's worst week as president, and no doubt the worst week of his life.
Do they really need glasses? That's my question. An NBC Wall Street Journal poll finds the president's approval numbers are remarkably stable, barely moving from surveys conducted right before and right after the Manafort and Cohen news. Dan, they were flummoxed over at MSNBC today. Chris Jansen, I used to work with her years ago. She's a nice person. But she's like, well, what do you make of this? The president's numbers aren't moving. I'm screaming at the TV, Dan, during my radio show saying, because the media are irrelevant. Nobody cares about what you say is the worst week. Bongino.
Yeah, you know, Laura, I've been honored to be doing cable news appearances for a long time. I used to do other networks. I don't anymore for obvious reasons. They don't want to report the news. But you know what they do on other networks? They watch what's happening on Fox. So to those other networks now, listen, everybody's laughing at you. They're not laughing with you. They're laughing at you. You know, Laura, this reminds me of an article I read. I forget where it was, but I read it a little while. I think Jonah Goldberg wrote it. And he wrote about how the government's war on smoking worked. Because everybody knew a smoker, and they knew how to talk to them, and they knew how to get them to quit, and it mattered. The media has no idea whatsoever how to talk to people who live in heartland America. They might as well be space aliens from Martians. They can't stand them.
Well,
and
they look down on
listen,
them.
we're laughing at them,
you know,
and they think they're winning.
All right, Chris, got to get Chris in here. Chris, I mean, look, the Democrats have had trouble connecting with those blue-collar workers. Republicans have a challenge with suburban women, clearly. But there does seem to be a disconnect. I mean, whether you're Republican or Democrat, on this middle America, what they care about versus what the media are all hot and bothered about. Chris.
Yeah. Well, look. Rarely are political careers destroyed by a bad day. It's the drip, drip, drip of scandal that is going to ruin the Republicans' chances of holding the Congress in November. Because there's been drip after drip after drip, and the campaign starts the day after Labor Day, and people are going to start hearing about those drips day in and day out, and there is more to come, more than likely. And that's the problem for the president's party, not necessarily for the president. The Fox News poll last week was very telling. I think it said a lot of things. This poll obviously has been very stable. Okay, but most of this poll was taken before what happened last week. But one scandal never ruins your career. It's the drip, 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 and there's been a lot of leaking faucets here.
Great conversation, guys. Thanks so much. Up next, the death of Senator John McCain, an American hero, being used by the media to bash the president. We discuss it next. My disagreements with John McCain over the years notwithstanding, he was an American hero, an American patriot, served the public for 60 years, 60 of his 81 years. But to some of the news media, the most important part of his life was his last 3 years when he feuded with Donald Trump. I wonder why they're doing that. And there was little love lost, we know that, between Trump and the late senator. But a simple question, is now the time to constantly invoke a political feud? Joining me with their takes, Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary for President George W. Bush, Monica Crowley from the London Center for Policy Research, and Juan Williams, co-host of The Five. Juan, what do you see happening here? There's been a kind of a nonstop series of complaints about how President Trump first tweeted about it. The statement wasn't long enough, the way the flag was lowered and then should have stayed lowered, then it was lowered again. And to me, it seems like a lot of this is getting away from John McCain, the man, and back to criticizing Trump, the president. Your reaction?
Well, I agree. I think that you have to honor John McCain, the man, especially now as we go into this season of grieving and pay our respects to him and to his family. He truly was an American patriot, I think almost the definition in our generation, Laura. But I disagree with you about the media. I don't think the media is the one that refused to issue the statement at the recommendation of the Chief of Staff, the press secretary. I don't think it's the press that lowered the flag just temporarily and put it back up today before then changing course. I don't think it's the press that's been out there taking shots at John McCain. I think that's Donald Trump.
Well, you know the current code for lowering the flag, it's been a tradition that it's lowered for the day of and the day after the passing of a member of Congress. In some recent years, it's lasted for several days. But it's not like Trump did something that's completely out of the ordinary. I mean, I probably would have just kept it lowered for till he was, actually buried. That's fine.
The American Legion said the same thing.
That's fine. But again, to turn this Ari Fleischer into, well, McCain was this type of man, and Donald Trump is this other type of man, immoral, without a great sense of patriotism, as he was not bipartisan, et cetera, et cetera. You get the sense that these political types are salivating over the opportunity to use a death to hit Trump. Am I misreading this?
No, Laura, you nailed it. And let me just stipulate, John McCain and Donald Trump did not get along. And that's the way two grown-up politicians can act toward each other. John McCain didn't want Donald Trump to come to his funeral. Donald Trump can return the favor by being dismissive if he wants. But the press, as they cover this, is very situational. They cover you depending on what situation you find yourself in. So in 2000, they loved John McCain because he was running against George Bush. In 2008, when John McCain ran against Barack Obama, they didn't really love him anymore. They loved him when he took positions against Republicans after he lost the presidential race, and then they didn't love him anymore when he was for the surge. Now, of course, that he's in a spat with Donald Trump, they love him again. This is how the press covers these things, and it's really just to stir a pot. It's not to shine an eternal light on the truth.
Monica, I remember back in 2010 when John McCain was running for re-election to the Senate, he ran this campaign commercial about how we need to repair that dang fence. Remember, he got a huge amount of blowback from the media saying, whoa, where's the other John McCain? So again, back to Ari's point, the media took shot after shot after shot at McCain when he was McCain, the conservative, standing up for, the pro-life movement, or in this case, building the fence or the border structure. But now that McCain is the opponent of Trump, they use that as a convenient vehicle just days before his burial.
Yeah, the press has always been shameless, but in situations like this, you see it put in bold relief. I remember in the run-up to the 2008 election, I remember Democratic friends of mine in New York and elsewhere saying, oh, John McCain, he's a moderate, he's a centrist, he's the kind of Republican that I can get with. And then after the election, I said, well, did you vote for him? Well, of course not. And when it comes to the media, this is the same media, so many of them, that professed to love the maverick until he won the Republican nomination for president. Then they began to smear him with all kinds of abominable lies and attacks. So this is who they are, and we know that. I just hope, John McCain has a special place in my heart because I worked for President Nixon during the last years of his life. Nixon was the commander-in-chief that brought John McCain home after he was released. President Nixon had many wonderful things to say about Senator McCain and had enormous respect for him. I think we all share in that. I just hope that in the next days leading up to his funeral, that we don't go down the path of what happened with Paul Wellstone, who was a Democrat who died in office, who's U.S. Senator, very far left guy, and his funeral was turned into this partisan jamboree. I think in death we ought to eulogize these people, honor their service to the country, even when we disagree with them, but respect their memory.
Yeah. Well, I think, Juan, Mark Short said today, we don't have to play the soundbite, but he basically said, look, if Trump had been very sentimental toward McCain, they would have ridiculed Trump, saying, you guys didn't get along. Like, you're faking it now. You said this thing about a captured POW. Now you're trying to, lionize McCain, basically saying he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Is there some of that going on with every move that Donald Trump makes? He just simply cannot win with this media.
Well, I don't think so. But, in fact, I think people try to make sure in the media that they are not in position to be criticized by Laura Ingraham. They go out of their way. To me, you got to go back to the idea that Trump, insulted the guy in a very critical moment and, in a way that says, you're not a hero because you got caught. And that just offended a lot of people, but it didn't stop Donald Trump from winning the nomination.
Right,
That's why I was going to say that to you. So, I mean, Republicans made a decision there. So I think that, ultimately this is about Donald Trump's behavior to a rival, and I just don't think it's admirable. I do not.
No. Well, no. Ari, I'll let you close it out. McCain, remember back in 2004, he joked about, like, he'd be number 2 to John Kerry on the ticket. Remember that? And Republicans went crazy. He was kind of joking. But the media loves it when a Republican is praising Obama or praising Clinton. They love that. But when a Republican is a hardline conservative on issue or after issue, that's when they unload. So McCain is, obviously in death, a war hero, is getting an amazing send-off, and I think that's fantastic. But Trump's not going to be a phony here. He's not going to pretend that he and McCain were buddy-buddy. They weren't. Trump was tough on him, and I wouldn't have said what he said about the POW thing. But you got to say both of them were kind of honest in the end.
And the other part of this that just bothers me when you talk about the press coverage is, don't forget, in 2008, there were reporters at the Huffington Post, columnists, who wrote that McCain was a racist. And we heard that throughout the 2008 campaign. But, this is not about Donald Trump. As much as I think that the flag should have been at half-mast, let the two have their feud. It's going to the grave now. But this is not about Donald Trump. This is about John McCain's life. And that's who we should be talking about. That's what the media should be focused on. And I really don't think this is going to move Americans if Donald Trump doesn't behave the way you want him to. All right. About John McCain. This is about John McCain's life, not Donald Trump's. An amazing life, an amazing American patriotic experience. Thank you all for joining us.
The latest, Rick, what are you learning?
Well, Dana, law enforcement sources are telling me the weapon used here was a .40 caliber handgun, and it was not registered to the shooter or his parents. That hasn't been officially confirmed. We could learn more at a news conference scheduled for the top of the hour, but obviously the focus is also on the gunman's social media, his past history, to see if any clues were missed, and also why security wasn't tighter at the event behind me. The gunman has been identified as 24-year-old David Katz, who apparently drove down from Baltimore to compete in this regional Madden 19 video game qualifying tournament for a chance at cash prizes and a trip to Las Vegas for the national title. But when he lost, he apparently walked outside, got a gun, came back and opened fire, killing 2 and wounding at least 9 others before killing himself. The gunfire captured on a live stream.
It's going to be hard to get him on stream. It's not a tough out today. Excuse me, not an easy out.
The victims included 31-year-old Chris McFarland, who was grazed by a bullet in the head.
There was a whole room full of people that were being shot at in a place where they were safe, where they felt safe. And, I think it's something that's going to affect me for a long time whenever I'm around a group of large people.
Well, several patients, Dana, have now been released. One is in serious condition. The rest are in good condition. All of them are expected to survive.
Rick, what else do you know about Baltimore, where he's from?
We're told that the shooter lived at home with his parents and that the shooters are cooperating with his parents are cooperating with the investigation. They have allowed the FBI and other law enforcement authorities to search this guy's bedroom and presumably his computer and social media accounts. They also, of course, want to know how he acquired the weapon and whether any of this was planned. EA Sports, which sponsors the tournament, has offered its condolences, and Jacksonville Landing, we're told, will reopen tomorrow. Dana.
All right, Rick, thank you for the update. There are big changes at the DNC and the role of superdelegates in their nominating process. So what this means for the next presidential election, we'll tell you. Plus, Michael Cohen's legal team seems to be changing their story when it comes to that infamous Trump Tower meeting. What they're saying now.
I believe that Mr. Cohen has direct knowledge that would be of interest to Mr. Mueller that suggests, I'm not sure it proves, that Mr. Trump was aware of Russian government agents hacking illegally, committing computer crimes to the detriment of the candidate who was running against Hillary Clinton.
That was Lanny Davis, Michael Cohen's attorney, speaking last week when he also addressed that infamous Trump Tower meeting and then candidate Trump's knowledge of it. But now he seems to be walking that back, telling the Washington Post, quote, "I should have been more clear, including with you, that I could not independently confirm what happened. I am not sure. There's a possibility that is the case, but I am not sure." Joining me now is John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and Professor of Law at University of California at Berkeley. Good to have you here. I want to talk about the Davis thing first. I understand that he is Michael Cohen's attorney, but it seems to me that even for, an attorney, that was pretty reckless and irresponsible.
Look, you can sympathize with Mr. Davis for having someone like Cohen as his client. I mean, Cohen has a thin grasp of the truth. Who knows what he told Davis in the time one versus now. Cohen's just a bag man. He's a guy who pays off women with hush money. And now I think what Cohen is trying to do, and maybe he lied to his own attorney, it's not uncommon. He's trying to exaggerate his own importance and sort of inflate his value to prosecutors in the hopes that prosecutors will give him a better deal, thinking he's going to cooperate and give him a lower sentence. But Mr. Cohen now has contradicted himself in public multiple times. I'm not sure whether we can believe what he's saying.
Is that, you run the risk if you're going to take your case outside of the courtroom and you're going to take it out to the court of public opinion on television, you run the risk. Do you think it would be better for Michael Cohen if he and Lanny Davis were to step back and to stop giving so many interviews?
I agree. I mean, I think what Cohen is trying to do, I guess, with Davis is trying to use a public forum to pressure Trump, to pressure the prosecutors to try to win a better deal for himself now that he's pled guilty. But I agree with you, Dana. The better thing for him, I think, would to clam up and to stop trying to manipulate public opinion in the press because he's contradicting himself, which makes him look like a liar.
Yeah, especially when your lawyer has to walk it back. That does not make anybody look good, and certainly it doesn't make the reporters trust you anymore. That's for sure. Can I ask you another question? Listen to Alan Dershowitz, who was on Fox and Friends this morning talking about the Mueller investigation and President Trump, but also the separate Michael Cohen investigation by the Southern District of New York. Watch.
His presidency and his businesses are in the Southern District of New York, not with Mueller. Remember, the Mueller investigation all involves issues that have constitutional defenses. The problem is that with the Southern District, there are no constitutional defenses. These are business investigations. And of course, the president can't be indicted, but his businesses can be indicted.
So we were talking about taking things outside the courtroom and into the court of public opinion, and we're talking about these on TV because they're of interest. And I wonder what you think about Alan Dershowitz's concern, I guess, there for the president, saying that the Mueller investigation, not as big a deal, not as worrisome as something out of the Southern District of New York. How do you agree, and how would you help explain that to people?
Of course, Alan is the master of in the courtroom and outside the courtroom, so I don't want to disagree with him. I actually do agree with him on this point. The real threat, I think, to Trump now is coming from New York, not Washington. If you look at the course of Mueller's investigation, the Manafort conviction, which is a great victory for Mueller, doesn't involve Trump, Russia, and the 2016 election. It looks like Mueller's really focusing on obstruction of justice now at this point, whether firing Jim Comey was obstruction. Meanwhile, in New York, you have, if Cohen is telling the truth, you have evidence that President Trump might have conspired with Cohen to violate the campaign finance rules. And I will disagree with Alan on this point. There is one defense that Trump can make, which is that he can't be, while he's president, indicted of a crime. The constitutional solution to a bad acting president is impeachment followed by prosecution. So I think, and this goes back to what we talked about before, Dana, the real solution for President Trump, I think, is to testify under oath in public with Mueller about what he did in both cases, now with Cohen and trying to hide these hush money payments, whether he did or not, and with Mueller about whether he fired Jim Comey to obstruct justice. He can end what was once called the national nightmare we're going through with all these investigations by simply coming out and telling the truth about what he was doing.
And you hold that position because you believe he is the chief law enforcement officer of the land, and therefore that's why you think that. Is that correct?
Yes, he is the head of the executive branch. He is actually, under the Constitution, the only one who's given the responsibility to carry out and enforce the laws. He has to. He should set an example. his constitutional duties come first, not his personal liabilities as an individual, Donald J. Trump. The president, the man in the office of the presidency, should cooperate with the law enforcement part of his job.
John, you always love having you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana.